All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Please don't jump out of the line, though. Please fill up your plates, and we'll just kind of use our inside voice together. First of all, welcome. Bienvenidos. My name is Paul Ortiz. I'm director of the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, and we're just so delighted and honored that all of you could be with us tonight. But I do want to begin by acknowledging the labor and the amazing presence of four incredible panelists who are going to be speaking tonight, and I want us to give them a warm welcome. We'll have a student introduce them properly in the few minutes, but I wanted to point to Minerva, Maria, Milagros, Fernando, and please let's give them a warm welcome. They are coming back. They have spent a remarkable day and time with our students already. We put them to work. I hope that our students haven't worked you too hard. They've had a day full of amazing discussions and conversations about not only the history of La Casita, which is one of the things we're obviously talking about tonight, but also where we are now, and talking to each of the amazing panelists and our alumnas, our alums, our brothers and sisters, our hermanas and hermanos. One of the things we wanted to use the event for is to really talk about where we are now as a community, how we move forward. And one of the wonderful things I've had the opportunity to do, talking to colleagues, the two busiest months of the year for me are usually Hispanic Heritage Month and Black History Month, because I'm often giving lectures on those topics. And I've already done 3 Hispanic Heritage Month keynotes this year at the University of Kansas, Rhodes College, and I just returned from Williams College. And I wanted to talk about Williams College for just one moment, if you'll bear with me. Williams College was an interesting experience. Yes, there are students at Williams College. It was founded just as the American Revolution was ending. And there, I was able to tell a Hispanic Heritage Month story that often is not told. And the story is that Henry Highland Garnett, who his whole family had been slaves in the eastern shore of Maryland, because that's where Williams College is, they escaped from bondage. But their masters, like most slave masters, followed them and sent patrols, vigilantes, to try to re-enslave them into New York. And Henry Highland Garnett had amazing experiences literally fighting and learning how to stave off these people who tried to re-enslave him. Later he served, as Frederick Douglass did, Frederick Douglass also on the eastern shore of Maryland, a lot of time in Baltimore. Henry Highland Garnett served as a cabin boy on a ship, and he sailed into Havana as a very young man, as an apprentice. He saw slavery firsthand in Cuba. So that when the Civil War ended and many people were celebrating the end of the U.S. Civil War, Henry Highland Garnett said, there's no reason for us to celebrate as a people. I've seen slavery firsthand in Cuba. It's just as bad as slavery was in the United States, and we need to do something about the freedom struggle in Cuba. And so I was able to kind of ground with the students and talk to them about how there's such a powerful connection between black and brown struggles, and use Hispanic Heritage Month to do that. We also are celebrating Asian American Kaleidoscope Month as well. And those of you that had the opportunity to participate in any of those events, along with Hispanic Heritage Month, Asian Kaleidoscope Month has been emphasizing inclusivity, connections between people's histories, inviting us in. I was excited to sit in the front row and to be with my dear grad student colleague Derek Chang, Director of Asian American Studies at Cornell University, and he gave a wonderful keynote in which he talked about the need for us to reject the idea of the model minority, because that's an idea that's often used to divide us from each other. So what I'd like to do tonight is just to encourage you at the outset to kind of review your program. Does everyone have a program, by the way? We have a few extras. I can kind of get them around. If you have them, please just kind of raise your hand. And I'll talk briefly about the order of events. and you'll be thinking, hopefully he will stop talking any minute now. But again, there's food, and so please feel free to get up quietly and enjoy more food if you'd like, more desserts. But we're going to do a little bit of, a lot of excitement actually tonight. We're going to premiere for you a film, a documentary, which our students have been working on, which is trying to tell the story, and we call it right now A Tale of Two Houses. How many of you had the opportunity to go to the groundbreaking last week of the IBC in La Casita? So a lot of us were there. As you know, the Office of the Provost has kindly supported the oral history program in working on a documentary, actually two documentaries, on the histories of those two very important institutions. So I wanted to tell you tonight that this program is part of that documentary. In fact, you may end up in that movie, in that documentary, by the way. So make sure that you have your best face to the camera, right? But we're very excited about it because this is part of not only the truth-telling about our histories and how hard we've struggled to get here, but again, where we want to go. And so right now, I would like to bring up, I think Juliet, are you going to talk about the documentaries? Juliet Barbera is the hardest working graduate student at the University of Florida. She's our senior graduate coordinator, research assistant and coordinator at the Oral History program, and she's going to tell you what you're about to see.
Hello. Sorry, I didn't really prepare much because I didn't know I was introducing it. But a lot of our students at the Samuel Prompts Oral History program, volunteers and employees, have been working to put this together. And so I wanted to read a passage from Edward Said, someone who is a Palestinian writer. And I think kind of captures kind of the reason why we're doing this, essentially. And also, I just wanted to let you know that this will be debuting in March at the African American History Oral History Symposium. And it'll be named after Joel Buchanan, someone who was active in establishing this oral history narratives. And so this is from Culture and Imperialism. One of the passages I'll just read from it. It says, "A great deal of recent criticism has concentrated on narrative fiction, yet very little attention has been paid to the position in the history and the world of empire. Readers of this book will quickly discover that narrative is crucial to my argument here. My basic point being that stories are at the heart of what explorers and novelists say about strange regions of the world. They also become the method colonized people use to assert their own identity and existence of their own history. The main battle of imperialism is over land, of course. But when it came to who owned the land, who had the right to settle and work on it, and who kept it going, who won it back, and who now plans its future, the issues were reflected, contested, and even, for a time, decided in narrative. As one critic has suggested, nations themselves are narrations. The power to narrate or to block other narratives from forming and emerging is very important to culture and imperialism and constitutes one of the main connections between them. So often with dominant narratives at universities or anywhere, there is a dominant narrative that is expressed even about people of color and their history. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that this type of documentary is going to try to talk about the history of the institutes, but contextualize it in the university setting. And I also wanted to acknowledge that this was made possible by student movements over time, this type of history, and the fact that we're able to kind of push to make these things important happen because of student movements and student voices. So I guess we'll play the clip. I'm not sure if any other students who've been involved in the project kind of want to talk a little bit more about it, but we have this project that we're doing, and we're also collecting oral histories. So we're trying to include many voices. So if you're interested, let one of us know.
in all kinds of weather we really don't all stick together. When I'm at UF, I don't feel like I'm a Florida Gator, but when I leave UF, I feel like I'm a Gator. I think it's because not everybody here knows that the university has problematic roots.
And they are afraid to touch issues of race because it brings up ugly things, because we don't want to talk too candidly about our past, and it makes us look very critically at us as a society.
The University of Florida does not give us things. All of these things were fought for. La Casita, IBC were fought for. And this kind of goes into the bigger picture. The United States doesn't give us things.
Morning.
People of color for generations in history have fought for their own liberation, for their voices to be heard.
When I first started at UF, when I walked into Casita, it felt amazing.
Bueno, ahí había un foco, un sitio que ellos podían decir que era de ellos, donde entendían su cultura, donde ellos se sentían como en su casa, no en un edificio de la universidad.
The currency of this work is not money, it's trust. It's our students' trust, right? And if we have no currency, then we can't do anything.
It's all rhetoric and bullshit.
Let's be clear that we stand in solidarity to continue this meeting and to remain quiet here while we continue the business. We're a part of the business. This is our institute. The decision should lie with us.
We are just the microcosm of the macrocosm. So this is just a time where if we are not pushing forward, things are going to be taken.
All right, what do you think? To preview, there's going to be so much more. So the entire documentary will premiere American History Symposium, March 21st, March 23rd. I wonder if I could ask my esteemed panelists now to come to the front and take your time and get situated. And I think I understand we also have a student moderator who is going to join us as well. Is that Daniel? Is he here? All right. And you will recognize him in the documentary. We had an amazingly vibrant... I'm wearing the thing, I didn't even remember that. I noticed that. I thought, that's really great. I mean, so that qualifies you to become a professor, because I was probably wearing the same thing last year at the program. Okay, right? So we're here. Okay, right. Turn the microphone over to you, Daniel.
So how's everybody doing this afternoon? Probably full of food, so I'm not going to make you jump up and respond back to me, but thank you all for coming. It's important that you're here, and it's important that you're participating for whatever reason that you're here. If you're obligated to be here, if your job requires you to be here, or if you're just interested to be here, it's important that you're here. And I am really just merely a student, that's it, but I am still inviting you throughout this conversation. If you have questions, this is for you all to ask of these people who have made the sacrifice for this space and have made the journey to come here. This is an invitation for you to ask of them. Ask the real questions. Ask the things that you don't normally get a chance to ask in your everyday lives. This is the chance for you to get the information straight from the source, not whitewashed, not gone through any sort of transition or any sort of whatever you call it. Like, this is the opportunity for you to hear what's really going on. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our panelists, and we're going to get into it. So we're going to start with, and then just so that the audience can recognize you each in turn, just raise your hand. We're going to start with Ms. Minerva Casanas-Simon, who was the founding director of La Casita, serving during the 1994-1995 academic year. Casanas, oh, yep, give it up. There we go. Started in 91, she had to let us know. There you go. Casanas-Simon was hired by the University of Florida as the first Hispanic student advisor in the summer of 1991. So there you go. She became aware of the lack of resources for Hispanic students at UF amidst significant student activism, and she worked with students to help produce the proposals that led to the founding of La Casita, after which she became the director. We're also honored to have with us tonight Ms. Maria Masque, who was the second director of La Casita, whose tenure ran from 1995 to 1997. She is a UF alumni with an MA in Urban and Regional Planning and a BA in Anthropology, as well as a founding member of the Gainesville Area Alianza Latina. As principal at the Planning Center in Tucson, Masque leads the Community and Regional Planning Division of the firm. Her interdisciplinary work focuses on social and environmental justice. Anthropologized in the U.S. and Canada, she is a member of the Latina writers group Mujeres que Escriben and lives in the Oto Valley of Arizona. So give it up for Ms. Masque. Next, we have Dr.Milagros Rivera, who was a faculty member. There, give it up for her, please. I'm not going to go on. Who was a faculty member in the UF College of Journalism and Communications from 1993 to 2000, and during that time was heavily involved in La Casita in its early years. Since May 1st, 2015, Dr. Rivera has been the head of Department of Communication Science at the University of Free State in Boefo in Teen, South America. Did I pronounce that correctly? Okay, there we go. In addition, she is the founder of Kerplunk Personal Mastery, a global training consultancy in the area of personal mastery, leadership, emotional intelligence, conscious communication, and emotional wellness. Give it up, Dr. Rivera. And finally, last but certainly not least, Dr. Fernando Fagundo, who is the Emeritus Professor of Civil Engineering at UF and was serving as the president of the Hispanic Faculty Association when students petitioned to create the Institute of Hispanic-Latino Cultures. He offered crucial support and guidance to the student founders of La Casita and remained involved after La Casita was established. Dr. Fagundo currently works as a consulting construction and forensic engineer with the FEF Group Engineering and Project Development in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Please give it up for Dr. Fagundo. So just to kick this off, I do have some questions on the paper, but I want to start off with, before we even get to the house, I want each of you just to take just a couple of minutes to share with the audience, what is your UF story? However you want to interpret that question. What is your UF story? Whoever wants to start.
Now? Oh, that's better.
Yeah, much better.
Good evening or late afternoon, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that wonderful meal. What is my UF story? Well, I moved to Gainesville in 1990. I worked a year at the State Attorney's Office with victims of crime. The University of Florida posted a part-time position to work with Hispanic students as a Hispanic student advisor. At the time, I have no idea of the history of this university with our community. I simply applied. I went through a very extensive, I think back now, interview process that included 3 panels for a part-time job. Somehow I must have said some right things because they hired me. I was hired on June 24th, 1991. And immediately after being hired, I was told that my responsibilities was work with the Hispanic population of students, which I learned at that time was about 2,400 students in campus. I began, my first year was mostly doing programming and getting to know the community of students, the different leaders, and who was who in campus. I learned that there were approximately 16 to 20 different colleges. Every one had a minority advisor. All were black Afro-American members. I learned the history of the university in regards to the black community. And so it was a big year of learning about what was happening at UF and mostly what was not happening with our community. In the meantime, I was blessed, because it was a blessing, to get to meet a very wonderful group of students who were very active. In particular, one has to be mentioned. Her name is Livia Noemi Rodriguez, who was a master's degree student in planning, same department that Maria is from, and who is a brilliant person with all the skills that you can imagine, and came to me. I learned to ask about the Institute. I learned that there was a quality of life task force report that had been put together in 1990 in April. Now understand that we had a new president, Dr. John Lombardi, had been hired in March. In April, there was a quality of life task force report, and within that report is the first time ever at the University of Florida that there is a mention of a need for a Hispanic Institute. So with Livia and the group of students that began to visit my office, I had a little office in Peabody, I think it was room 205. It fit about 3 or 4 of us max. But we began to have conversations about what can we do about creating an institute. And I realized then and there that 2 things. One, that I had to get the leadership together because I was having too many individual meetings. So I created the Hispanic-Latino Student Council. And 2, that I needed to work with students in approaching administration in a positive way. Of course, students being activists, some wanted to march, some wanted to do this, some wanted to do that. And my goal was, how can I take all this wonderful energy and this interest and channel it? And that was my beginning here.
Okay.
My story of UF. Wow, that could be my next novel. But anyway, I'm going to start saying that I arrived in the United States in 1980 as an international student from Venezuela. And I was born in Cuba, so I already have come to the U.S. as a refugee, moved to Venezuela, and then this was my second coming to the United States. Was probably as unpleasant as the first one. But anyway, I arrived at something called at that time the English Language Institute, the ELI. And all of the students that had English as a second language had to go to that institute and then take an exam on the language called the TOEFL. And that TOEFL was test of English for the foreign language, something like that. So the experience at that time in 1980, 1981, 82, those years, it was really isolating in terms of being a Latina that didn't speak the language, being in the campus that was very white at that time. And so I decided to move to the college. So I went to Santa Fe Community College. And there's a whole story attached to that that is too long to convey here, so read the novel. Anyway, so then I came back to the College of Architecture in 1983, I think. And when I finished my bachelor's in the college, BA in Arts. And once I was here, I went through, I didn't finish architecture, I moved to anthropology, got my degree in anthropology, then I went to the master's in urban and regional planning. And throughout that time, I was working with Vivian Correa, that during my master's degree. She was one of the members of the Quality of Task Quality of Life Task Force. And so anyway, and that's a task force that both Minerva and Fernando were involved with. I didn't meet them then. It took me a while. I was really involved with bilingual education in that time with the Department of Special Education with Vivian Correa as the principal investigator. And we were producing modules for teacher training for Florida teachers to be able to recognize the difference between placing children in special education and in bilingual education, which they were being misplaced, like people with disability were going into ESL programs, and that was not solving their problem. And people with language barriers were going into special ed. So that was probably one of the areas or one of the places, even though at that time I was a master's student and I didn't have that much of Latino access in the community because we were all spread around, but I mean, some of us didn't know about each other. So at that department, I have Sandra Frad that was very involved doing research with Marielitos in South Florida, and I was participating in those oral histories. I was a graduate student, and I also have Vivian Correa and Elva, and so it was a little group of Latinos, Latinas that we were involved with those programs, and also involved with teachers throughout the state that were dealing with those issues in school, and we were training them. So those two programs were Collaboration and Reform and Infusion were the two programs that I work with the special ed. Those two programs led to two national think tanks that dealt with child development in that time, that were addressing the issues of the impact of neighborhoods into the life of children, and we're looking at neighborhoods that were disadvantaged neighborhoods, particularly African American communities, Latino communities, Asian communities, all the different ethnic groups, and also looking at what was the future going to be like in terms of the growing numbers of what we call minorities, and how we needed to change curriculum and create curriculum to address the new populations coming into place. So that pretty much sums my history of UF, I guess. There's a lot of it that you can read between the lines, and I'm going to pass it to Milagros.
Hello. Buenas noches, hello. My history, I came to the University of Florida in 1984 to do my master's from Puerto Rico. And it never occurred to me that I needed to know English. You know, those things that you do when you're young and you don't think about limitations, you just show up. And suddenly I don't understand anything. And so it was extremely challenging for me. I spent my entire life in the library. And I look back and I found a book one day. I defined every single word. I rode my bicycle and I carried a 4-pound dictionary, English, Spanish, Spanish, English, to try to understand. Was very, very difficult. And I think when you have those kinds of challenges, you end up isolating yourself, completely focusing on your studies just to survive and to pass. So that was my initial experience at Florida. Then I went to the University of South Florida, and I worked there for 3 years at the Florida Mental Health Institute doing videos for education. And then I returned and I did my PhD in the College of Journalism and Communications, and I did media law. And when I came to the university, I had already finished my master's, and even though I had very bad English, I finished with distinction. I had very good grades. I went away, and when I came back, I wanted to do media law. And there was a professor who came, and he was an endowed scholar, and he told me to my face, "You're not good enough to be here, but I was outvoted by the committee because they know you, but you're not good enough to be here." And so I chose him as my advisor because I said, I'm going to prove you that I am. And when I finished, then I was hired at the university in my college, and I was the first Latina in the College of Journalism and Communications. Wow. And again, thank you. When I was hired, it was quite controversial because the university did not look favorably upon hiring your own. And so that was quite controversial, and I had one colleague who came and told me the only reason you were hired is because you're Latina. And so I had to work really hard to prove that I was hired. Yes, I was Latina. My college had 52 professors and no Latinos and only one black. And I don't think that has changed a lot since then. So we sometimes do things that are important, and then somebody tries to put us in our place and tell us that what we're doing is not because of any intrinsic value of who we are and what we bring to the table, because of we are a quota person. And I challenge you to not let anybody say that to you. I didn't believe it, and I proved them wrong, and it's very satisfying. But also there are people who may be a little bit less sure and don't believe those stories because they're not true. And so we'll talk some more.
I think we all have a story, so I'm going to share a little bit of mine. In 1970, I finished a bachelor's degree in engineering at the University of Puerto Rico and joined the United States. Were rather complicated times, not only in the military, but also of civil engineering. The Treaty of Paris was signed in June of 1973. And that Friday afternoon, I met the personnel man at the Air Force Base, and he told me that the United States Air Force had decided that all officers in active duty who wanted to retire could do it immediately. They had all the officers coming back from Vietnam, and they had an excess of military people. But Monday morning, I was there, number one in line. Sign was released from the Air Force, and 2 weeks later, I was in graduate school at the University of Puerto Rico. While I was working there on my PhD, my brother was a student at the University of Florida working on his master's degree in engineering. So I was sort of familiar with the institution. And one day I realized that there was an opening at the faculty at the Department of Civil Engineering. I applied and I got the job. But I wish I had seen the introduction to the trailer that we just saw a little while ago. Because the fact is that just a short generation before that, this was an all-white male institution. There was no room for Hispanics, no room for African Americans, and no room for women. So I realized that very shortly after arriving in Gainesville, Florida. It didn't take very long. But there was a group of students here and a group of administrators who wanted to change that and wanted to work very hard in changing that story. That's how the story then of La Casita starts. And I hope we can share that with you in a little while.
I mean, that's really, that's really what we're here to talk about, but I just really wanted you guys to share a little bit of that because everybody here in this room, like, we're here at the University of Florida, so we have a UF story. And for a lot of us, some of us who may not necessarily understand about the houses, but some of us who do, like, the houses are part of that UF story. So with that, talk a little bit about the advent of La Casita. Like, what were the events surrounding it being created, and how did you personally influence that? That can go all day, but try to...
say, you got about a year so I can... I'll give you the briefing of it. So I mentioned to you that once I came here and I got exposed with the student leadership, we began to talk about La Casita. At the time, it was not La Casita, it was a concept of having an institute for Latino Hispanic students. And what happened was that the students, when the student council kind of formed, and they formed a coalition under Libya, they began to research and do homework, and they were very, very active. And they wanted that Casita badly, that, they wanted an institute badly. So jump to many little things happened. We started writing to administration. What my role in it was, as an advisor, sort of behind the scenes, was to help them navigate sort of the political system in terms of the proper and the protocols to follow, as to who you send a letter to, how that letter should be addressed, make sure it's in a positive way, and sometimes not so positive, but reaffirming your concerns and your needs, and what proper channels to do that, whether it was to Dr. Arsendine, which was at the time the as Vice President for Student Affairs, whether it was to Jim Scott, which was the Dean, whether it was to Dr. Lombardi directly, and so on. So that happened. That took from September, we started the year before, getting ideas, but from September of 92 into 93, we began to work with administration through letter writing. I got involved into connecting myself. I found out that there's a Florida Hispanic Commission next to assigned by Lawton Childs, the governor. Mm-hmm. So I make sure that I met that chair, and she appointed me to a local chapter that I didn't know exist. The intent of that was to create a little bit behind the scenes political power and to create tentacles at the local and state level at that point. We also talked about expanding those tentacles to the national level, and therefore you will see letters, because I brought a bunch of documents that I found in my paperwork, to Saúl Irtaguirre, who was the CEO of the National Council of La Raza, now I think it's known as Unidos, which was the premier organization representing Hispanics at the national level. We worked with the National Puerto Rican Coalition, whose CEO was a friend of mine, and we looked at different areas, if you will, as to where we could find support to make the Casita happen. And I must say that Conchi Treyes Bretos, who was at the time the chair of the Hispanic Commission, was very helpful, because I found out that she was a friend of Dr. Lombardi. And nothing, one of the things about how to do things is information is power. So you learn who's connected to who and for what reasons, and you use that to your advantage. Yeah. So that's what we did with the students. And my role was, again, behind the scenes, almost everything was student-driven, or I was a member of Dr. Fagundo was the president of the Hispanic faculty, and I was a member, I was the secretary, if I recall. So we will have these discussions and proper channels of letters to different persons, again, all of this culminating on September 23rd, I get a visit from the Vice President of Student Affairs. And believe me, I think in my 3 years here, I think he visited me 2 or 3 times. He was a very distinguished man, had a habit of sitting with his legs across you and go like this. So kind of, and you're sitting across like, okay. And he came and he said, you got your institute, but you can't tell no one. You could imagine. I was like, it took me, I don't know how long. It'd be interesting if there was a little fly looking at my face, because I was just processing this. My God, we got the institute. But I can't tell no one. Of course, as Dr. Fagundo knows, I immediately called him, and I called Livia. I promised I wouldn't say anything, but I knew that these were people whose loyalty and respect and admiration I had. So I knew that if I told him and I said, tell no one, he would not. I knew if I did that with Livia. So only the 3 of us for 4 days knew that this institute was a reality. Of course, administration wanted to come from them, and they put an activity where a letter came out inviting me and inviting Dr. Fagundo and Livia and a few others to meet at I believe it was Tiger Hall, and there were a couple of alumni invited to make the announcement that the institute was a reality. And that was October of '93. And 5 days later, there was an inauguration ceremony done in, I forgot what building. There were so many things we did, too many places. But that was to the first semester of '93. And then on the second semester of '94, now the issue was, now we have the institute. Of course, I should backtrack and share with you that on March of '93, the students have gotten together and wrote a proposal. What people didn't know, that the students was Livia Noemi Rodriguez, a young man by the name Carlos Tovares, and yours truly in my living room at midnight. We put it together. Livia wrote samples, and we just brainstormed ideas and things, information that we had, and she took those notes and came back about a week later with an actual proposal. I have draft of that original proposal. Then we had a second draft, and finally we have cleaned it up and made it nice enough. And then that proposal was signed by all the current student organizations. Understand, when I came here, there were about, I believe, 3 Hispanic student organizations: the HSA, Hispanic Student Association, HES, Hispanic Engineer Society, and I believe CASA, the Cuban American Students Association. They were pretty much active, and LEA was beginning, Latinos en Acción was beginning to form themselves too. So with that in mind, by the time that months later, in March 30th, that proposal is delivered to administrators, it's already up to 7 organizations, 5 to 7. So we're growing in numbers, and the students are organizing by college. Now the Hispanic Communicators and the College of Business and so on. So that was great to see, that the students were beginning to see the power of unity and the power of supporting each other. The Institute was becoming a reality, we knew from the beginning we have asked for the house in 1504 West University Avenue. It was originally the International Center. Later on, when you have a chance, go by the office and see the pictures I brought about what we got, which was a building in disarray. I worked with Livia, and by then there was a young lady by the name Vanessa Carlo, also got involved. And we work with the planners or engineers of administration, and we put the casita together. And that include creating floor plans, creating furniture. That what was happening in terms of the practical side of doing things for La Casita. What was happening politically was that, yes, you're going to get a house, but now we have no money to fund for furniture, no money to refurbish it. So student government offered some money, ended up, I believe, I never saw the money, went to somebody. I believe they donated $20,000 to refurbish La Casita. One of the issues that came during this process was that the black students got somewhat upset, reasonably so. Their IBC was falling apart too, and they needed repairs, okay? So I sensed what was happening, the divide and conquer techniques that I think is still very much alive as we sit here. So we met with some of the leadership of the IBC, and we said, we need to have a united front. You support us, we support you. Because a piecemeal approach is not going to work if we fight each other. So that's what we did. And I believe that they also got some money to refurbish the IBC, if I recall. So that's how the Institute became a reality. We opened our doors in April 1st. And I've always said, April 1st, what is that day? April Fools? Okay. Originally, we were given it March 31st, and then I don't know to this day for what reason was changed to April 1st, but April 1st it was. And I have learned with the students, and I will say to them, you know, you have to pick your battles. So, you know, it's not an ideal day, but it's a day, let's take it and move forward.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're going to do it. So that's what we did. We put together total activities. We wanted to have a banquet, celebration, the whole, and it didn't happen. The university decided to do things piecemeal. So in October, they had done the announcement. Now they were going to do the dedication. So we did the dedication on April 1st, and I recall Dr. Lombardi spoke, Juan Vitali, Vanessa Carlo, Dr. Fagundo. I think I made some remarks, and I believe Lydia spoke. And then we did the unveiling of the sign that was in front of La Casita. By then, we have managed to furnish and cleaned it up. And was in April, I was moved to the Institute. Now, let me backtrack here and share with you what happened. At the time...
Just to jump in really quick,
Yeah.
Can you speak into the microphone?
Oh, sorry. At the time that I was going to be transferred to La Casita, administration decided to eliminate my position in student services. You know, nothing, one moment of happy and here comes the next blow. So the students got very upset, and reasonably so, because what people didn't know was, you know, some knew and some didn't, was that when my job went in 1991 from part-time to in May of 92, I became full-time. I was also assigned to work with 2,000 Asian students. So now I had 4,500 students to work with, plus all the responsibilities of the casita. And one thing in most of our job descriptions says other duties as assigned, and that was an endless list that I won't get into it here because it's long. But it was, we knew that we had, you know, and I knew that I had my work cut out. So I could go on talking about La Casita and you know, what it meant. And but for me, once they split my position, my concern was when we put the proposal together, we wanted somebody with a PhD because we wanted somebody, understand we didn't want it to be called a cultural center. We wanted an institute. And the purpose of that was because it was more than a place to gather and have festivities and music and food. It was a place to educate people, to do seminars, to do workshops, to do educate the community at large so they get to know who we were, because it wasn't about being insular and all about us. It was about sharing our culture with others, working with the black community, because obviously in our diaspora we had every member of the race.
Right.
So understanding those things, we saw a bigger thing. We wanted a research center, a place of depository of all the history of Hispanics in the state of Florida. That was part of the vision that we had for La Casita. And when my position, so that's why we wanted somebody with a PhD. I wanted a colleague that could support me and whom I could support to make that happen. Unfortunately, administration decided that they were going to, I didn't have a choice, by the way. I was called into administration and told, you either take this position or you don't have a job. So I accepted. I had to send a letter to administration accepting the position. Mind you, I'm working here and accepting the position, which job description I didn't know what it was going to look like, and I moved into La Casita. But they gave me one secretary. They allowed me to hire a secretary. Some of you remember Iris Campbell, or have heard that name, and some graduates, I believe it was work study students that helped us out. And that's how we began until the end of that fall on May of 1994. Came the summer, the fall semester, the spring. The fall semester starts in late August. I come back to my job. We're ready to go. We have the Hispanic-Latino Council have their first meeting. We're organizing about, I even have an agenda about the list of activities we were going to do at La Casita or from La Casita. And my immediate supervisor was a gentleman by the name Willie Robinson, who was the assistant dean for multicultural affairs. Not sure of the history, but something happened and Willie decides to leave the university. And at that point, I thought a major opportunity for me to move to the next level. I have a master's degree. I'm a graduate of Michigan State University. I am fully bilingual. I have had now at this point almost 3 years at the University of Florida. I've had a very good working relationship with students across all ethnic backgrounds and differences. And so I thought I was in a good position to be given the opportunity to do that position interim or permanent. Make a long story short, and I won't get into the details, I was called into administration by Dr. Hill, who was our dean at the time. Dr. Scott had left campus to Georgia. And when he left to Georgia, Dr. Hill was hired. And Dr. Hill called me into his office and said that I was not going to be given that opportunity. I will say this, I usually don't like to say negative things. I'm always for look at the positive side, but some things you can't sugarcoat. And the reality was that I think I was denied the opportunity because I was not black. You know, nothing to do with the black community at large, simply his decision, because that position have always been held by a member of the black community. So I realized at that point there have been difficulties going on at that point that my job here was done. And hence I resigned from the University of Florida officially. I resigned knowing that we were putting an inauguration together on September 22nd, and I wanted to be that my last event, which it was. And we stayed until that inauguration event, and the next day I left campus.
Okay. So in the interest of time, we're going to open the floor for questions. However, please keep in mind everything that you wanted to say on that same point and wrap it in, because that's what we're all here for. We're here to see what you have to say. We just want to ask some questions. So if there's anybody, student, who'd like to ask a question, you need a mic.
For a student who, say, is not identifying themselves as part of the Hispanic community, what do you think they can do to make Hispanic students feel more welcome on campus?
I think that was the role of La Casita, and I don't know how many of you knew La Casita before it was torn down. but we had a conversation this afternoon precisely about the role that the Casita played in making people feel welcome. You come, a university is a very jarring experience for most students. You come to a huge place. If you're Latino or if you come from a place where you've always spoke Spanish and suddenly all around you is different, everybody speaks English, or if you always spoke English and nobody noticed your accent, now everybody noticed your accent and asked you where are you from. And so La Casita was that place where everybody went and felt welcome. I remember that I was always referring students to La Casita. They would come to me and say, I was in the College of Communications as a professor, and they would come and talk to me because I was the only Latina. And they would come and talk to me in Spanish, and then I would just tell them, go to La Casita. And many of us did that because that was a place where you actually could come in, and we were talking about that. You go and you arrive home. And La Casita has that meaning, that connotation, that feeling of warmth, of welcoming, of embracing. And one of the things that we've been talking about is that we hope those of you who still have a couple of years here to work toward recreating that. Not just for you, but for those who come after you. Because it makes a huge difference to work into a space. It's like, you remember the program Cheers. You walk in and everybody knows your name. But that's the way that La Casita works. You go there and everybody knows what you like, what you're like. Everybody supports you. Everybody gives you that warmth that you cannot get anywhere else. Fernando, you want to say something?
No, La Casita are two things. Number one is the building, that we have heard the story of how we got that building. But number two was the function, which is what Milagros was describing. It served as a home away from home. This was 1980. There was no Facebook, there were no cellular phones. Students left home, and they left home like for a semester. And if they were from Latin America, they left home for a year. So La Casita serves the function of replacing the family that was being missed. That was the spiritual function in addition to the building function.
I'd like to say a couple of things in terms that your question was related how to get students involved in those kinds of, in this situation, how to get more Hispanic students or general community involved. I think it's very important to come from students because actually those of us who are sitting here were the people who were there to support the students. However, the students are going to be the ones who create the programs or at least ask us, I need this. And without you saying, I need this, there's no way that we can help. And there's no way that things can happen. So one of the things that need to, I think that those of you who feel that might be a little bit like, because of the fact that you have an empty site, and many of you have lost the history and lost, don't know what happened before, I think that is why having the history is so important. Because that gives you an idea of what the possibilities could be. However, you're going to be the ones that are going to need to determine what is your vision, what is your mission, and how do you want to be served, and what is it that you're not finding out there, how is it that you're not being represented out in the campus in general, and making lists of those things. And I believe that what the students did back then that was very successful was that they had, like Minerva mentioned, a student council that included the leaders of all of the student organizations. There were plenty. At the time that I was director, we have 16 Latino, Latina, Chicano, Chicanas, Hispanic, whatever different, like WEPA, you name it, and all of them. And so what they needed to do was they will decide what they wanted to do and then negotiating constantly with student government, finding support with the professors that you know and you identified out there, and trying to build the bridges. It's about building bridges, it's about connecting, it's about networking, and also know that one single person is not going to be able to create that kind of momentum, that you need to work as a team. Because if one or two people try to do that, you burn out. And then you are going to jeopardize your academic life, which is the important reason you're here. However, as Fagundo said, if you want longevity, if you want programs to serve you, you need to get involved. Nobody goes into a place that they don't feel they have ownership. So to have those visioning process among you on what would be that I like to see, what I want to envision, and don't limit it to only festivities and things. When we were in the program, that's totally fine, but there was inclusion of arts, there was inclusion of music, there was of poetry, of literature, of academic programs, of symposiums, of leadership training, of team building, of all kinds of things that were the need of the students, were the needs of the student back then. Your needs might have changed, so you have to speak together and find out what your needs are right now and what you're not getting out in the campus.
I should add, I think Maria did a good summary, and I would like to add that you don't need to wait for that building. The time is now. The time is now. Okay. I think this university needs it very much based on what I've been reading recently. You could meet as a group anywhere on the lawn, outside. Yeah. That's what we did. Remember, my office was the space of 4 people, so we never met there. There was no space. And you could start so that by the time the buildings, you as a student administration say, okay, the buildings are ready for you to move in and start doing your activities here, you already have everything in place. You're ahead. And there's so much talent among you. I always had this faith in my students that they were going to come through. And I call them my students. I don't know why, but I had that ownership. I believe in them. I believe in their talent. I believe in their ideals. And so, you know, my job in that sense was easy because I was just there to cheerleader for that support. For them to do what they envision, because that way they met their needs. And if you do it as a group, you give the message to administration in a positive way. For example, I'll give you an example of something you could do right now. There's no reason, it seems to me, why you all not can get together and have a student leadership retreat. We did them. I took 60 students once a year to Ocala, to a hotel. By the way, make sure if you do that you include student government, that you include the IBC leadership, because it's about sharing, not about just yourself. And you'll be surprised all the fantastic ideas and program development that comes out of those events. Those are things you could do. The Hispanic Student Assembly was a great idea, but that's to introduce to your new incoming peers, here we are, we're welcoming you, and so. But the retreat took it to a different level. You were already here, you were showing some interest in some of the things you would like to see happening in the university. Those are things you could do. You could plan for future programming. And one better way is we have left among all of us some wonderful information for you to look at the history of some of the programmings that we did. Look at them. No need to replicate. Make them yours, make what works for you, what your needs are. We were laughing among ourselves and talking about with technology we have come a long way. You know, with technology, so how do you incorporate your needs and your interests with the technology that we have now into developing that? And for that, like I said, you could start yesterday.
Can I add something? And I think we discussed this morning. It's very easy to begin to look inward into your respective groups and start thinking only of the needs of your groups and start seeing the others as competitors. Don't fall for that trap. And work together, because when you're together, the numbers are stronger. Administration is going to listen to you. You have numbers in your favor. 20% is a significant number of students. And so it's difficult to ignore, but it's much easier if all of you are going in different directions and looking for different things instead of coming together and saying, we want this, but we'll compromise and we'll have these 5 programs that we want to work toward as a group. And then you get those things, and later you can get the others. But don't get into infighting. Be very strategic about this, because the moment you start fighting among yourselves, management won't take you seriously.
I think if there's any question, any more questions?
Hello. Hi. I just wanted to thank you all for coming out and thank you for sharing your beautiful work. So it's been about just about 20 or 30 years since you all were experienced with the University of Florida, and unfortunately, as some of you have said, not a lot has changed on this campus, especially as far as the racial climate on this campus. There are still a lot of very prominent racial issues that are often overlooked or unaddressed on this campus. And so, you know, with all of your experience with UF and this 20 to 30 years afterwards, what would you like to see from the university as far as what action would you like to see or initiative would you like to see them take in order to create a more stable racial environment for people of color, a more cohesive environment for people of color and the white students on this campus?
Since I have the mic, I'm going to address a little bit that and then pass it to all of you. I think that it's very important in this time right now to come to terms with the fact that, again, unidos, united, all of the different groups, you need to be able to put a front out there. I'm going to give you a little bit of examples of what was happening back in 1992 and in the 1990s, early 1990s in Gainesville, Florida, and actually on campus. And you will see the similarities with what you just said of today. There was a celebration of Hitler's birthday in the downtown plaza in Gainesville in 1992. There were Ku Klux Klan actively all over the region in Lottie and Waldo, in Palatka. I was one of the people that were student activists going to all of those protests with my little sign saying, you know, equality for all. Well, we were reading signs that said like, specs die, you know, Negroes go home. I mean, all kinds of horrible things. That was the 90s. What do you think is happening now that is parallel? You have Spencer come to campus, and how much money the University of Florida spent to create safety to, you know, harbor this kinds of, you know, ideologies on campus. Back then, we have the emergence of the White Student Union. There was a lot of hate crimes. I was in one of the task force that I was working with our representatives to pass the hate crime bill that was passed in Florida. So those kinds of things were going on back then. What do you think we are right now? Same exact place. It's almost like, again, I mean, and it doesn't mean they went away. It means that the highlights are the same right now, and it's dangerous times because, again, the hate crimes are on the rise. You find swastikas, you find people that scream at you in the street, those kinds of things. So going back to what to do about those things, I think it is important that we talk about racism. I think it is important that we talk about privilege. I think that it is important that we come together in groups and do circles and do have the conversations that we were having back then at the Institute for Healing Racism. That was a program that was combined between the University of Florida Institute of Hispanic and Latino Cultures and the Institute of Black Cultures. And I think you need to come to terms with the fact that you need to have some programs that are for your own group, but you also need to have to reach out, like she was talking about, those tentacles, and build those bridges between each other. The administration is never going to give you anything without a fight. And we are dealing again with the fact that, why do you need that? We're doing everything nice. But in the bottom line is that University of Florida got an F, all right? And you know what I'm talking about, okay? So we have an F in diversity. How can some university in the state of Florida, which has such a diversity of people, have an F in diversity? So what I would do to convince administration that they need to take care of this is tell them, listen, we can help you achieve a higher rate. We can help you get to the A. Just leave us alone and let us do our work. And let us do it the way we need to do it, not the way you think we should be acting within our communities. Because we hear about inclusivity, but oftentimes inclusivity doesn't mean inclusivity. We have white people defining inclusivity for us and telling us that we need to have only one house for everybody. And I'm sorry, but what is happening when we do that is you're concentrating the functions of two big groups into one sole building, and you are reducing your capacity for programming. Of course, if they throw everybody in one center, they're going to be happy because you all are in one box, you know? But your ability to program and your ability to create is going to be reduced because they're going to be putting us to fight with each other. Oh, there's only one conference room. Who's going to use it now? You understand what I'm going, you know? So that is the reason why you had a movement of students that were brave enough. Some of them were almost expelled for speaking up. That's the only reason. That's happening now. It's not something that is a history, but it happened then, back then too. So one of the things that I suggest is that you build those coalitions, you work together, and you present a united, continue to present a united front as you've been doing. You were able to from one building to two. So you see the power. Okay, you see the power that you have, you see your creativity. The other part of it is that you need support from people who are passionate about what they're doing. And you need to request that passion for the people who are going to be representing you, whether they are administrative folks or whether they are directors or whether they are staff or whether they are faculty. They need to be driven. They need to be passionate. Because all of these people here, we risk our jobs. We were not about job security. It was about believing this is what we need to do. Okay? So those are the things that you can start doing, like she said. It's like, I know, we are hermanas because she passed me the directorship of the Institute. And one more thing that I want to say, continuity is very important. What she started, I continued, or we continued. It's not about politics. Politicians stop things because they want, oh, no, it's about me. No, you need to continue what happened before and then create new programs that are going to be serving the new needs, you know, and then at one point or another, maybe the program is not necessary, but, you know, keep those things in mind. Networking, continuity, union, working together, and intersectionality, like defined by us. Inclusivity, defined by us, not defined by the people outside and tell us how to define ourselves, because what they're doing again is putting us in a box. Their box, not our box, not our identity, but their box.
I couldn't agree more with Maria, obviously. We think alike. It was so great when she took over when I left because, as you could see, but one thing I would add to what she just said is learn and utilize the resources you have at hand. Mm-hmm. And one of the biggest resources you have at hand is the media and the power that that brings. Utilize it to the max. One of the things that we were very effective was that, I'm trying to recall, there was a month that went by that we did not have an article on the alligator or someplace. I put together a little magazine and distributed. We did a program and said something about the Institute. Keep it alive, keep it out there. So when you're talking about programming and you're talking about that, look at what's around in terms of resources, just not the manpower in terms of the students' wishes and so on, but what beyond the university do you have? Do you have the power of the accessing the alligator? Can you get to somebody at the Gainesville Sun? Do you have a knowledge of somebody in the state that it has a friendly ear to our community? At the local level, at the county, wherever this at, because you never know where it takes you. So you might reach that person, and they might say, thank you, but no thank you. You have lost nothing. You know one door, not to deal with it. You move on to the next one. So all that networking, all that power, be aware that administrations usually do not like too much in the media unless it's positive. Therefore, when you take that media, you challenge them. Don't be insultive, be challenging, be demanding, but demanding in a respectful and rightful way. Because you and I know that there are many ways to say something. And so think about that. Choose your words carefully, you know? Because you will challenge administration to say, wait a minute, this is a group of students that mean business and they know what they're doing. This is not just a group of students that kind of scatter and don't know what they're doing. Power of information, power of knowledge of those resources and utilizing them. And they will take you seriously because they don't like to be in the newspaper on something negative. I mean, I am sure you that Tiger Hall is not happy with that article about where UF is at in terms of diversity. So here's a great timing and opportunity for you to, group of you to get that Latino council together. I call Latino council, call it whatever works for you. But go together and go there with a proposal. Get together, put a proposal together and say, here is 3 things that we could do this year while the institute is being built that we want to work with administration to improve race relations in this campus because we recognize it very desperately needed and we as a student are going to take charge of it. How are you going to help us?
I wanted to add and maybe summarize some of these comments. But universities have 3 components. They have an administration, talking about minorities. That's a very small group. They have the faculty, and they have the students. And universities are good academically, not because the faculty is good. They're good because the students are good. The universities win by selecting the best students at the beginning. That's how they become good universities. That's how the University of Florida has become a good university academically. And if the students unite, they join efforts, and they go to the administration, they will listen to you. Like Minerva and all of the group here is saying. So keep that in mind, that you are the reason why the University of Florida is a good academic institution. It's not the faculty, and it's certainly not the administration.
Can I add something? And I came here from South Africa. I currently work at the University of the Free State in Bloemfontein, South Africa. For the past 2 years, students in South Africa, actually from 2015, I arrived there in 2015 and the whole thing broke loose. Students were protesting 2 things, the cost of higher education and the content of the curriculum. They got free education, and now we're in the process of transforming the curriculum because the students felt that here we are, black students, students of all groups that were previously disadvantaged, and we're still reading the same Western-centric narratives that completely leave out who we are, where we come from, our diversity, our contributions. And one of the things that's really important is that this is, if you want, this is just a suggestion, to take this as an issue. Because there are extremely powerful narratives out there from Latin Americans, from Latinos, from blacks, from every group imaginable that we are not listening, that we are not engaging with. And that, I think, diminishes what you get out of your education. And so I encourage you to try to talk about this. We call it decolonization of the curriculum in South Africa. You can call it whatever you want. But start requesting that these things change, because otherwise we keep continuing the repetition of these old narratives without adding anything to them, and we are erased from those narratives. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for one more student question or just question in general from the audience. Is there anybody else who had a burning question? Oh, we have a question right here. Wish we could stay all night, but we cannot.
I want
want to thank you so much for coming out and speaking with us. It's wonderful to hear people who started La Casita. Dr. Fagundo, I want to thank you so much for what you said about the fact that you were all there at a time, or La Casita was founded at a time when there was no social media, and at that time there was an even more like a grander feeling of isolation from students, which is something I didn't even think about at that time. How lonely students must have felt, how that separation at that time from home, and that just makes me think, what is it that you all did at that time when you didn't have social media to unify the Latino population on campus? Because I can't imagine how you would have done it.
Oh boy, well, no tweeting, no cell phones. We met. We had everlasting meetings. We were constant. Some meetings were short, Some meetings were just meeting for half an hour, got to the business of what we had, an idea of an agenda, maybe just to discuss one topic, or maybe to discuss many. But we took advantage of social events to discuss things. So not surprising, going to a party, in the middle of the party, we're having a mini meeting to the side, just it was a lot of things that we did to be together. I think credit goes again to the students. We are available, but it was the students who saw that need, and to their credit, they realized that the power was in them to pick their battles. One thing that you have to realize when you're dealing and fighting administration and all these side things distracting you, pick your battles about what your actual goals are and how you're going to reach those goals. Otherwise, it's very easy, and it's very easy for administration to distract students into different channels and get you away from your goals. So, when we had the goal of forming an institute, and there were other issues about changing my positions, issues about race relations in campus, all kinds of other things. But when it came to issues of creating a proposal and making the Casita happen, we were constant.
I want to add something. Okay, how to communicate when you don't have social media. It was very grassroots. We have phone trees. We develop phone trees. So one person will call 10 people, and then each one of them will call 10 people, and each one of them will call 10 people until you reach 3,000 students. And that's how we did it. And that's how we distributed, at least during the time that I was there. Also, we have Iris, we have the student assistants, the times that we're at the Institute, they were constantly sending. We had the beginning of email. Once the email came out, wow, we discover, wow, it was just like a trip, so it was like emails to everybody, and so, but anyway, phone trees was one, word of mouth, and that was about anything in campus. So if you talk about being a stretch thing, I tell you, it was Milagros, Fernando, Minerva, myself, and many others that were in our situation. We were the token ones to attend every single event, and we did because we knew we needed to be there because we didn't have that social media. But now that you have social media, use it to the biggest of the extent, I don't know. You want to add?
Can I add that sometimes we get so involved with technology that we forget that the real power is in conversations. We go, thank you. How did people see each other? They see each other at funerals, they see each other at weddings, they see each other at christenings, and that's what we did. Every time we got together, we would plan something, we would work on something. The next thing was in the agenda. And technology cannot substitute that. And I would say, and I love technology, that it can get to the point where it diverts you. I was with some students today and they were saying, I'm in a group and if I turn my phone and then I turn it back on, I have 500 messages. Who can read 500 messages? So sometimes technology becomes a distraction itself. And nothing substitutes the coming together as a council in a circle, talking, sharing, face-to-face, connecting. Don't forget that. That's important.
I want to add what she added about the council, having a council where you have all of the student organizations present, the leaders, then everybody goes back to their group and discuss with the group. So you have one layer of discussion, you have another layer of discussion, and you get, again, you have that human element. You can send the email for everybody to know where when the council is going to meet, or whatever you want to name it, but it's one umbrella group that is going to be inviting all of the leaders to do programming. And then once you get organized with what you want to do for your very different organizational needs or individual needs, then you communicate that to your own groups, and then effectively you start organizing. And when you're in a party, you go to the corner and you just talk about whatever it is that needs to be done, and you just make it fun. You know how to do that. You're very creative, so I know that you can do it, okay?
Let me just add to that find that faculty too on campus.
Yeah.
Who are those, our Fagundos and Milis that are here? So you might say to me, well, there's only 3. Well, go approach those 3. Maybe you get one to join your group and help you out. Because for us, how we did it was word of mouth. And for me, the most effective way, because I have so many issues and responsibilities I have to work on, it was to get that council. And if I could get 3 of the student leaders, boy, they were like fire. They spread information like fire. It was better than any email right now. I was thinking here, as you asked the question, I said, was there ever a time that we miscommunicated? No, it's very effective.
Yeah, most important thing. Oye, ¿qué pasa? Mira, tú sabes que fulano y el otro. You just be yourself, Don't let anybody tell you how to be. I think that's the most important thing. And we lose that cultural component when we're texting, and you don't pass that identity, that character, and that sense of yourself when you're doing all of the media thing. And I'm not saying not to use it. It's very appropriate for some things. There are people who overuse it. You know what I'm talking about, all right? Especially among our higher leadership. But anyway, I mean, how can you get anything done if you're texting all day? I mean, I wonder, but anyway.
Thank you so much. I just actually want to make an announcement, but I first of all want to thank you all so much as a staff member, as a Latina at the University of Florida. I just see I feel like I'm meeting my professional ancestors, the ones who I'm standing on the shoulders of, and so I just really appreciate your presence and your wisdom and you bringing that back to the university. So thank you. Muchísimas gracias. Yeah. And I just wanted to also announce we actually have been working over the summer, myself and a couple of colegas, to revitalize the Latino Staff and Faculty Association, which is really exciting because, as you mentioned, it's really important for our students to know that they have allies in the work. And so far we have over 70 Latinx staff and faculty who have shown interest in that. So that's also going to be a part of continuing this work. I do want to just announce for my folks who obviously you're interested in this kind of subjects, MCDA along with Hispanic Heritage Month and Counseling and Wellness Center is actually having an event tomorrow that speaks to some of the intersectionalities that we talked about today. It's actually about queering the Latinx community, and it's about really exploring the intersection of being LGBTQIA and Latinx. And so that's taking place tomorrow at 6 o'clock. We'll also feed you dinner over at the Rights Union 2201. So I just wanted to invite folks who might be interested in continuing this conversation and exploring that parts of our identities. Thank you so much.
Thank you. There's one more group. There's one more group that I want to add that sometimes is overlooked because it's kind of not in front of us. The alumni. Yeah. The alumni, they certainly have significant power. They provide a lot of funding to this place. Mm-hmm. So
and many of them are in the media.
And many of them are in the media. So yeah. Among Among of them, find those alumni that are willing to be. Yes, yes. And she's been there for many a years since our time. Find out those alumni that are in key positions in this country. You'll be surprised the talent in our nation that this university produces. I don't know if many of you are aware because you're a younger generation that we are, but when I was here, Blue Key, do still exist around? Blue Key? Very much alive, I suspected. But Blue Key was the breeding for our governors and our senators and our congressmen. Back then, I couldn't think of one that did not come out of UF Blue Key or similar organization. So it's not just about, get involved with student government. Find out what's happening down at Rights Union. Because when I was here, we started with $7 million. That's what the students were getting. When I left, they were getting, somewhere in the 7 million. Hispanic Student Association started with $7,000. By the time I left, it was 35, and I hope now there'll be at least $1 million produced for them. Okay? Oh my God, I'm coming back and getting some money for you now. So, there is resources out there, and that alumni has significance. So find those alumni that could be also your support. Because let me tell you, what that gives administration is the message. You have your act together. You are looking at the media in written, media in the new social media. You're looking at alumni. You have gathered as a student leadership, and so on. So, one of the things we did, by the way, was one of the students had the idea of putting together a petition to do the institute, okay? So they said, oh, well, we'll do a sheet and have people sign papers and we'll deliver the papers to administration. Well, I suggested, I said, well, how about, and to be honest with you, I don't even know if it came out of me or one of my students at the meeting, but in one of our meetings, we came up with the idea of putting a single card so that we could deliver a package of cards. There's a very different impression of getting 5 sheets and getting a package of petitions, which is what happened. On the 500th year celebration, October 12, 1994, of Columbus arriving in America, the student walked into Lombardi's office, or Sandine, I think was, and delivered 700 signatures, individuals. That's power.
I just want to ask, could you repeat the place where that event is going to take place? Oh, which room? Okay. Say 6 o'clock? Yeah. I have to say that I pretty much, I'm sure that this is true because I know you. I was the first queer Latina director of the Institute of Hispanic, and I was out back then, okay? And one of the topics of the first collegiate forum, the second one, was working among LGBT, which is the name that we had back then. And what was very interesting to me was that, like, my first week at the job, I had this student storm in and ask me, what are you going to do about us? Anything you want. And it was like, yeah, but we are LGBT students of color, and nobody pays attention to us because we're having problems within the LGBT group that are not dealing with us being people recognizing because they're racism and all these kinds of things. And then we get bombarded with homophobia within our own community. And I said, well, what do you want to do? So from then on, we started creating programs for that. So I have, I guess, the honor to be the first out queer director of the Institute. And I want to leave you with what thought before I leave. In 2015, or before we all leave, in 2015, the Bureau of the Census prepared a report called the Minority Majority. And if you read that report, you are going to realize why we are in the big crisis that we are in this country, because people are so frightened, okay, of what's going on. That report actually projects the population to be majority minority. The whole oxymoron of being a majority minority, that's like genuine imitation, right? I mean, it's just such an old term, but that's how the Bureau of the Census work. So, and what I'm trying to let you know is that we probably are going to be, your generation is going to see the first Latino, Latina, or African American, or Asian president, or Native American president of the University of Florida. And it is in your hands to open the path for all of that to happen, because the numbers, we are going to be the numbers, and we are going to be the majority. So if we stop fighting for crumbs, and we start getting together, creating the alliances, and preparing right now for what is a trend and what is already happening in many states is already a reality, okay? Go in that wave and create more waves. And I can assure you that you will have one of your groups, one of the members of any of our groups, be president of the University of Florida. And that will be actually a really cool thing to happen, because only we have our people in position of powers, it's very hard to be able to have effective change. But you still have the power, and everything comes from the grassroots level all the time. Change never happens all the way, as you've seen in Congress and the House and the Senate. Nothing happens from the top down. Everything happens from the bottom up. So I just commend you for being here. Thank you for being here. Keep moving forward. Don't forget your history, because that lot is empty that long so that you can be erased. Don't forget your history. Mi abuelo José María used to say, la gente que no sabe su historia está perdido, son almas perdidas. The people who don't know their history are lost souls. So do not let them erase you. Come back, and just another high tide is what you need to be organizing for. Thank you.
So, very quickly, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for sharing with us a very inspirational story about the Casita. And from alumni, twice graduate of this university, actually my professor from 26 years ago sits there in front of us, very, very much inspired. I wanted to tie all this into corporate America. So I'm a structural engineer, now project manager for one of the largest engineering firms in this country. And these are the topics that we speak of day in and day out. And our corporation, because of people like you that are making a stand, has declared October 15th through the 19th Inclusion and Diversity Week for an entire corporation of 77,000 people. So it starts at the university level. You take it with you wherever you go. So I commend you for starting all this at this university, and I hope that all the students that are here take it with them when they leave, because we need more people like you.
Can you tell me what's the corporation name?
Jacobs Engineering.
Oh, yeah, I know them. Yeah, I work with them a lot.
Yeah.
So we just have, and again, this is such an exciting time. We would love to stay here the whole night, but we've only rented space for 2 hours. So this has been wonderful. I also an event. So the Oral History program on October 17th, we have a very special student panel where our students who were in the Mississippi Delta this summer gathering oral history interviews with veterans of the civil rights movement are going to be presenting, and I think that's going to be here. Is that correct, Ryan? Oh, I'm sorry, Pew Hall at noon, October 17th. The other thing I want to mention, I'm going to hand the mic over to two of our current oral history program students, is we've been talking tonight a lot about inclusivity, interconnections, being there for each other when or in crisis. So we have a recent graduate of the University of Florida who is in need of our support and in crisis right now. To talk about her briefly, I'm going to hand the microphone over to two of our current students.
No. Hold on.
Hello, my name is Grace Chen, and the student we're talking about is Laura Al-Kazem. She was accepted to a master's program at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and she arrived there on this past Tuesday, and she was then detained and threatened with deportation. She's of Palestinian descent, and she was granted a student visa for a year, and so she's currently detained, and tomorrow morning she appealed her deportation, and she's waiting to hear from the Minister of Interior, but we have a petition to contact your local representative, state or federal level, to just share about her situation, and yes.
Okay, so I'm not sure, but if most of you have Facebook and you said that you were going to this event, check in about an hour or so, and we'll have a link to the petition where you can sign your name and that kind of stuff. We've actually been in contact with a couple of our representatives about the situation, and they're currently monitoring what's going on. So at least we have that going on, but any support would be helpful. So thank you.
Awesome. So we're going to get ready to wrap up. But before I leave the closing remarks to the panelists, I just want to say that, first of all, when I even first heard about this event, the word encuentro, reunion. If any of us have had family reunions, it's an opportunity for the past, the present, and the future to get together. And you really learn a lot. You learn a lot of stuff about your family that's just kind of like, I didn't know that we did that. Or, oh, we could continue that tradition. Like, where did that go? And I think this is a perfect opportunity because us as a family, you a family, whatever, well, most of us anyway, can take this as an opportunity to recharge, become inspired, and reach out to our fellow peers if we claim these identities as our own, or even if we don't. Like, the entire idea of intersectionality is the reason why we're able to have events like this and we're able to grow. And it is the reason why when that's lost, you start to see the issues that you're seeing on campus happen, because now we're being made to think that we're all separate entities, but we are all in this together. And so even just the fact that you are all educators in your own right, that means a lot more than just assigning homework and acting as like a sort of like disciplinarian in ways for students. Like, as an educator, like, you were there for the students when they needed you. And as somebody who's been in a position before where I needed guidance and I didn't know, or when I was with the other students, we didn't know exactly where to go. It was because we had people who were willing to put their own jobs on the line and say, we are here for you. That is important. And that is why those houses are there, were there. And that is why they're coming back today. And so thank you from me. Thank you. And so we're going to wrap this up. Just some closing remarks to the audience from each of you, and then we're going to go home.
First of all, I want to thank Dr. Ortiz and Ryan and all the staff and all the students for the invitation, and specifically Maria, because I'll tell you a quick story. I'm at my house in Tucson, Arizona. By the way, we both live in Tucson and didn't know it. I'm in my house one late afternoon, door knocks, I'm holding my dogs, I open the door and there's this person and says, "Oh, I found you." You could imagine my face. I'm looking at her like, who is she? And then obviously my face was the expression. She says, "It's Maria Minerva." And once she said that, everything clicked. We spent at least an hour.
I think so.
And conversation in the house. And here we are a few months later. This was back in late spring or early spring. So I want to thank Maria, because for me to get that visit and to sit with you here today, it just makes my heart glad, because it's memory lane. And it gives me encouragement to see all of you and to see all this talent and all the students, to see what the Institute can become again. I was heartbroken when I heard that the Institute, kind of falling off. And I hope that as you move forward, that you're not just but the staff that is here in the work with the Institute, I hope that they realize that this is not a job, this is a passion. In order to do this job to the best of your ability, to do it well, to do it beyond excellence, you have to believe in it, and you have to believe in yourself, and can't be worrying about, are they going to fire me or not? Because it's just not in the equation. Because if you believe in it, when the time comes, you know when it's time for you to leave. And it so happened. And you leave that legacy for somebody else like Maria to come along and look at, you know, and everyone. So, but I hope that one day in the near future, I get a phone call and say, the doors are open. Because I believe, if anything you read about me was that I had strong belief in an open door policy. That was the key to my success with the student. My door was open always, and my phone was always 24/7 available, right? So I thank all of you. It's been a privilege and an honor to be with you here today, and to see my good old friends like Dr. Fagundo and Millie, who we not seen each other for 22 years. So you could imagine when I walked in here and I saw these two, it was like family. It's family. This is not colleagues of far away that we did little things together. This is family, folks, and it's glad to see family. So thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity, and I wish you the best.
Top that. But anyway, legacy is the theme of your Hispanic Heritage Month. Keep building that legacy because you are the next step. You are the next, cycle. And I always like to idea of Native Americans who believe that you need to leave this earth living in a better condition that you came to it, and that you need to leave it so that it is sustainable for the next 7 generations. And so when you work from your heart, not just from your mind, you can be strategic and you can do all this programming with your mind, but when you put your heart in what you do, whatever it is that you do, in the case of the institute, the new institute, put your heart on that, or whatever it is, your own careers, when you put your heart on it, you have less resistance from people. I work with thousands of people who are so angry because I get into their community and they're very frustrated. And when you listen to them, they change. And then they're able to work together. So I would say that the first meeting that you all have is about listening to your frustrations, listening to those who feel anger. I mean, let your anger everything and share it with your peers. The other thing I want to leave you with a message is, please, if anybody treats you in a manner that is not appropriate, and that's very common, and it was back then and it continues to be for what I've been talking to different students right now, any form of racism, any form of phobias of any type, you not only are going to communicate this, not to the administration, find a group and do work together so that you present a united front to the administration and say, this is not acceptable, period. This is not acceptable. Because when you go as a person to complain to a certain committee of administration, they can blow you off, very easily. That's what they normally do. But when you get a group and you just say, this happened to several of us now, and it has to stop happening, and we want something to be done about it, because that's not even legal, then you get a result. So do not let yourself be isolated on any circumstance, on whatever happens out there on campus to you. Find other people, talk to each other, bring it to your group, find the professors that are going to align with you, that are going to support you and take you by the hand and go there and represent you and say you have to believe the student and you didn't do anything about it, those kinds of things. So remember that, because we are still in colonial times, all right, at the University of Florida. We're still suffering. I was just making a little arc. I don't know if you have seen that arc that has been going on around, but this is how much time elapsed during the time of enslavement And then we have this little sliver of time that was the reform. We still are suffering the consequences of that colonial mentality that you're not relevant. It needs to be done my way or the highway. Well, we are going to change that. So keep working together, because the union, if you're united, you have power and strength. And if you have power and strength, change happens, all right? That's what I'm going to leave you with. And thank you so much to Paul, Ryan, Juanita, Julia, Daniel, and Tamara, who's not here, I think. Or there you are. Yeah, thank you so much for making this possible, for working so hard, and for recording the histories and keeping an archive of what's going on. If you ever need anything about us, contact us. We are available. They have our email. So you can, now that's a way to use the email. I will respond to you immediately, okay? So thank you. And thank you so much. It's been an honor to be here, been an honor to be with my good colega here, and with my great support system, because without Fernando and Mili and all of the people in the community, I want to acknowledge Saided Avendaño over there. I'm sorry, but she's my mama from Gainesville, and she was the owner of K Classics, and she fed us all the time and helped us every time there was an event at La Casita. She made empanadas, she made all kinds of things, pan de jamón, whatever. So she was a big accomplice in just getting the president of the university to listen to us, because I ordered her to send, to make me hallacas and pan de jamón, because I knew he had lived in Venezuela. So I sent him that, and that began a really good relationship, because then he wanted his hallacas every Christmas, and I went, I give you your hallacas if you do this for me. So learn how to negotiate, use your culture for that. So thank you, Saided. En un aplauso para ti.
From this group, I'm the only one that when I left Florida, I went to Indiana and I hated it. And I lasted 2 years, but from the first month I was there, I wanted to leave. There was no diversity. I felt it was extremely racist, and I had been in the US by then for 17 years. And it was the first time I actually experienced being in a space of discomfort. And so I ended up in Singapore. And I spent 10 and a half years in Singapore. And after that, then I spent 7 years in South Africa. So I have been away from the United States for almost 20 years. And I feel that I want to come back next year, and I'm feeling that I'm coming to another foreign country, because I don't recognize this place, the way it's changing. And maybe that's why I need to come back. We need to come back and contribute. But because I've been in Africa and in South Africa for the past 7 years, I wanted to share a concept with you. And you may have heard this phrase. It's called Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is an expression from the Bantu people from the Southern Africa region. And it means I am because you are. And so we are because you are. And what we did and what we care about was because you care about. And we were here for you. And there will always be people who are here for you, to support you, if you care enough to give it your passion, your energy. So reach out, because there are supporters out there. I was very busy, but when a student came to me, when Minerva or Maria reached out to me, we always dropped what we were doing and we contributed, because we are because you are. Don't forget that. Thank you.
Occasions like this, for many of us, are very important, because we get to relive the past and observe how things have changed. But to me, it has been more rewarding meeting the young people that are here, the new students that I have never met before. And I think that the future looks bright for these programs at the University of Florida. I think there is the power here to do it and the capacity to do it, so success to all of you.
Just a quick reminder to anybody who's here who has any sort of like history of their own with La Casita, you know, pictures with people, personal interviews, whatever you may have, please make sure that you get in contact with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program. It's basically an event put on by them in conjunction with other people today. Make sure that your stories are recorded, send that footage in because it's all going to be part of the Masque archive, and that is going to be the well of information that future students are able to reach into and understand where they fit in the current context of what's about to come, because these buildings are coming back, and all of this is important to fitting into that history today. Yeah. Oh, short film. Does anybody want to talk about the film really quick? Like lasting, and then we're out of here? Okay.
It's debuting March 22nd, so it's a two-part film. Right now it's titled A Tale of Two Houses. We're always open to suggestions just in general. So maybe we'll do focus groups or something coming along just to get input before we debut it. But part one will be about the IBC, part two will be about La Casita and just the history, because for myself, I did my undergraduate here 2018 or 2009 to 2013. Then I came back 2015 till the present time, and I just seen like the narration of like what these houses are change over time, and I think that's very like alarming to me. And just in general, there is like an omission of the Black campus movement and what all of that was about, and just I don't know if you look online, like there's different narratives of like what the spaces are, different news articles to different spaces. So Samuel Proctor Oral History is our motto, the community of many voices. So we're hoping to incorporate, like Daniel mentioned, like if you have anything that you want to contribute to us, we would hopefully, if we can't include it in the documentary, we want to include it into the history, because now we have generations of students who've never been to La Casita or IBC, and they don't know about what that was like. And then I even saw like a newspaper article about the groundbreaking and just kind of the way that things were quoted. And we don't probably have time for this, but I know Maria Masque did a report in last April that talks about just some things that she found in terms of the houses and like all of that. So hopefully it'll be available through live streaming maybe, but it'll be at the African American History Project Symposium. Joel Buchanan, we're going to be unveiling that collection. It's a 3-day program, and on Saturday we'll be doing two films, and it'll be moderated. So stay tuned for that and join the symposium, because I believe it's one of the largest collections of oral history of African American history, possibly. We haven't confirmed that, but very exciting things.
So there you have it. Best way to get information. Make sure you get connected with them on Facebook, or just head to Pew Hall, the very top floor, to the Samuel Proctor Oral Histories. They have like a whole set of offices that you can go get information. So if you're really interested, go seek out the information. But I believe that's it. So thank you, everybody, and have a good night.